Some people who aren't as familiar with ray marching have asked what makes the ray marching used in Herl so different from the standard method of rasterizing meshes that are used for rendering in most games. And the people who do understand how fundamentally different and powerful real-time ray marching is have been raising some doubts that Herl really is using ray marching because it is able to achieve these extraordinarily high frame rates when other implementations of ray tracing and ray marching usually get very low frame rates. Ray tracing can deliver photorealistic results, but it is usually too slow to be used in real time, which is why it is used to render realistic CGI effects in movies, but not used for video games in real time. So I'm making this behind the scenes video to show that Herl really is drawing the world with just 2 triangles and a single call using ray marching. And again, I'm not talking about NVIDIA's RTX or Microsoft DXR ray tracing rasterization extensions that everyone's all aroused and titillated about, because that stuff is not really ray tracing in any canonical sense. And I really wish they hadn't used the term ray tracing, because now anyone who is involved in real ray tracing has to explain to the audience that they aren't talking about some simplistic mesh intersection stuff that's getting tacked onto traditional rasterization to make it look a little bit better. I mean, they've made a fine addition to the traditional rasterization pipeline, but it is not anywhere near the same level of sophistication as real ray marching. So why call it that? Marketing people and their usual BS were probably involved and came up with that terminology. But anyway, what I'm talking about is real ray tracing, or actually mostly ray marching, because you need to do ray marching in order to do anything more complicated like clouds and terrain. You have to be able to march up to the intersection to find it. Unlike spheres and simple geometry where you can just use a formula to detect the intersection. Okay, so now you can see I'm running Herl in the Unity editor, and you can see that I'm getting a fairly high frame rate. My internal frame rate says around 190 frames per second. Unity's stats say something like 400, 500. I don't know why Unity thinks it's so much higher. But I think they're accounting for overhead and subtracting it off, overhead that doesn't exist. I'm going to assume that my lower number is correct, and I'm only getting like 190 frames per second. The other thing you'll notice is the number of triangles and vertices is in the tens or hundreds of thousands, and you might think, aha, Herl is rendering meshes. It isn't ray marching at all. And you'd be wrong, because Herl is a hybrid. Some things are ray marched and some things are rendered using traditional rasterization. For example, the spaceships and a few other things in the heads-up display are rendered as meshes. It's just easier to do it that way. Some things are better as meshes, some things are better as ray tracing or ray marching. So let's go through and disable them. Okay, so now we have a few thousand tries and verts. Let's disable the HUD and other stuff. And now I've got some shadow casting meshes that I use to generate shadows for the bases. I can turn them off. They aren't in view right now, but I want to disable them so they don't pop into the pipeline as I move and look around. Okay, now you can see that I'm down to just a few dozen tries and verts. I won't get those numbers down much further because various things built into Unity like buffer clearing and post-processing use a few tries and verts on their own, and there's no point in trying to track down and turn all of them off, but because you can already see that all of this that you're seeing right now is being rendered using ray marching, because there's no way you could do this with traditional rasterization and only a couple dozen triangles. I mean, Just one of these Mandel bulbs would probably take a mesh with around 100,000 triangles, and then look at how many are being rendered. And then look at all that terrain. There would be millions of triangles involved in a mesh that described that terrain. And if we fly up to the generator, this thing would probably be another 500,000 triangles. So all this that you are seeing is being rendered just 2 triangles in a single draw call. Now, if you didn't understand before, you might understand how this is different than traditional rasterization. Everything's being done on the GPU with a single draw call, not a lot of CPU time involved here.